of opinion inside the Labor Party. Joining me to discuss today are Labor Parliamentary Secretary for Sustainability and Urban Water, Don Farrell, and Liberal Senator Cory Bernardi. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Lyndal.
We'll go first to the AWU issue, and Julie Bishop stepped up her attack today.
Julia Gillard set up an unauthorised incorporated association that was in breach of the laws of Western Australia. And the reason she didn't open a file within Slater and Gordon, a file that would have shown a new legal entity was set up, was because she and Wilson and Blewett wanted to hide from the AWU the fact that an unauthorised entity was being set up to siphon funds through it for their benefit and not for the benefit of the AWU.
The Deputy Leader of the Opposition has gone out to do a number of interviews where the misleading has just got worse and worse and the allegations more and more wild. But the Deputy Leader of the Opposition has confessed during those interviews to being in the company of Ralph Blewett last Friday. She's had her own Godwin Gretsch moment. Her own Godwin Gretsch moment.
The Prime Minister will resume her seat.
Now, Ms Bishop clarified her morning comments today, saying she didn't intend to mean that Ms Gillard had benefited from the association. Cory, given all the events involving what was then called Utegate and Godwin Gretsch, was it wise for Ms Bishop to meet Ralph Blewett?
Oh, she met him incidentally between her appointments and spent 10 minutes with a person that is at the centre of a scandal. Now, the problem with this scandal
but
is...
But she did meet him.
Well,
she
indeed,
did agree to meet him.
But the problem with this is that the Prime Minister hasn't actually come clean and been upfront about it. She's tried to fob her way out of this by having, press conferences, call with journalists. She hasn't been prepared to answer directly questions within the Parliament.
She has. On both yesterday and today, she's answered questions directly in the Parliament, and some of those asked by Ms Bishop today go back a long way and are things that have been asked of the Prime Minister time and time again, and she's answered them.
She did give a direct answer in the Parliament today, and that's the first one that I'm aware of. She said no, that she hadn't benefited personally from it. Now, I welcome the fact that she's prepared to do this, but time and time again she's tried to dismiss this issue as some sort of conspiracy theory. Now, what we do know is that the people at the heart of this are Ms Gillard and Mr Blewett and a former national president of the ALP. There are questions the public want her to answer. She should do it within the Parliament so that misleading the Parliament is a much more serious offence than trying to mislead a few journalists.
Don Farrell, do you accept Senator Bernardi's view, Cory's view, that the Prime Minister is not answering questions?
No, I don't, Lyndal. I don't think there's been any Prime Minister that's answered more questions on any topic than what Prime Minister Gillard has answered in respect of this issue. In fact, in her press conference yesterday, she recounted all of the times that she'd publicly responded, both in press conferences and in the Parliament. I think the idea that Julie Bishop just bumped into Mr Blewett accidentally is about as likely as Ingrid Bergman walking into Rick's Bar in Casablanca in the 1940s. There's obviously something going on here. Julie's completely obsessed by this issue. I think it's time for the opposition to move on. There's far more important issues like cost of living that the Australian people want to hear about, and the Labor Party wants to talk about those things.
Indeed, Cory, your leader, Tony Abbott, told your party room today that you'll be unveiling detailed policies next year and talking about a positive agenda. That wasn't the case in the Parliament today, was it? Every single coalition question was on this issue. You weren't talking about policy or things you want to do.
Let me agree with Don for a moment that I think there are much more pressing issues that the public want to hear about, but right at the heart of them is the integrity of the Prime Minister. This is the Prime Minister that told us, there was not going to be a carbon tax, that she's had nothing to do with this affair, this slush fund. She's told us repeatedly a number of things which haven't borne fruit. Now, we need to resolve this.
But she's also, hasn't she, answered questions on things, say the question raised by Julie Bishop today in question time about whether she paid for all her renovations. She's answered that time and time again, hasn't she?
One swallow does not a summer make, let me tell you. So she's answered one question directly.
But
Let's resolve it.
Several,
Let's resolve it. Let her make a statement to the Parliament. Let her resolve all the questions, answer them directly, not fob them off in the normal question time fashion, and then we can all move on, and I think the public would be grateful. We can put an end to this very quickly if the Prime Minister tells the absolute truth and comes clean.
But it is, isn't it, put an end to what? What actual allegations, claims do you believe she needs to
These
answer?
claims and these allegations that simply won't go away about her conduct as a solicitor in this AWU Workplace Reform Association. There are all sorts of things. Who were the members of the association? What happened to the money? When did she know about it? I mean, partners in her former firm
But there's not
are
been a
already
suggestion,
coming out.
has there, that she knew A, about the money, and B, about what happened to her?
There's been all sorts of suggestions out there, and look, they've been canvassed.
None of them are correct, of course.
Right.
And I think the Prime Minister has stood both before the Parliament, but more importantly, before the journalists here in Canberra for pretty close to 2 hours now. She's invited them to ask all the questions that they want, and nobody has substantiated any allegation against the Prime Minister. It's now time to move on
It'll
from
be
the issue.
refreshing for the Australian people to know that you think the journalists are more important than the Parliament.
Well,
You know.
look, being assaulted by Julie Bishop in the Parliament is a bit like being hit by a wet lettuce. I mean, the real questions...
Paul Keating now. Gosh, you can do better than that.
No, I can't do any better than Paul Keating.
dear
No,
me.
I like Paul
The
Keating.
recession we had to have, you like him for that as well.
We might move on from that time and go to events of today, to the UN vote on Palestine, which will be held this Friday, Australian time. The Prime Minister told caucus there were sharply held views inside the party. She's decided Australia should abstain. This is what the Foreign Minister had to say.
You'll only get a peace if you've got an arrangement on the ground, the creation of a Palestinian state, living side by side and at peace with Israel, with security guarantees for Israel. They'll only arrive through a negotiated settlement. In other words, it needs to become a deal that both sides are committed to as if their lives depended on it. And you don't get that deal through a UN resolution. You get it by negotiations in which the touchy or neuralgic issues of status of Jerusalem, refugees are dealt with. There's a trade-off and there's a binding agreement, and they get up from the table shaking hands. Now this is not that. It doesn't pretend to be that. It falls short of that. But given that this vote had become a referendum on the idea of a Palestinian state, we did not, the Prime Minister and I, did not want Australia to be voting no.
Don, there have been suggestions, reported suggestions today that the Prime Minister originally wanted to vote no in this issue, and that she had her mind changed during the course of the soundings she took. Do you know if that's the case?
Look, the Prime Minister made it clear that the position that she put to the caucus today was a compromise position. There were really three alternatives. You could either vote in favour, you could vote against, or you could abstain. The position that the Prime Minister took to the caucus meeting, which was supported by the caucus, was that Australia would abstain. What the Australian government want to see is peace in the Middle East. What we want to see is a long-term peaceful arrangement where both the Israelis and the Palestinians live together in a peaceful environment. We think this is the best way of proceeding with that ideal.
You say it was, she said it was a compromise position. Do you know if she changed her own position for that compromise, and was a compromise needed, because there are views on both for all three sides within your ranks?
Oh, look, there's a range of views on this issue. Bear in mind that the issue is coming up on Thursday of this week. People did have varying views within the party about how to approach this important issue. We've just, of course, seen last week very difficult circumstances in the Middle East. We've seen the ceasefire. The Australian government wants to ensure that we give the best chance of getting a long-term peaceful settlement of the Arab-Israeli issue, and this is the way the party decided we would proceed with.
Do you know if the Prime Minister's view changed during the course of the debate?
Well, look. We had a discussion about it. The Prime Minister indicated what had been going on in terms of her thinking on this issue, and she proposed that the way we proceed with this as an Australian government was to abstain from the vote, and that was the way she thought best represented the position of the party.
Cory, do you think abstention in this case was the best course of action?
It's a much better course of action than supporting it. But let's be clear here. The Prime Minister wanted peace in the Labor caucus, And the position she took to the Labor caucus was not her position, it was Don Farrell's position and the Labor rights position.
But aren't leaders open to compromise? A leader doesn't necessarily always impose their view if that was her view on the party,
They can be open to compromise, but there's an authority that should be lended to the position of Prime Minister. And the Labor right have said, no, if you do that, you're in trouble. And the Labor left, of course, are irrelevant. They're just doormats in the Labor Party, and that's, because they keep protesting about these things and they're not taken seriously. In the end, Don Farrell and his faction are controlling the Labor Party and telling the Prime Minister what to do. That's fair enough if that's the position, but let's not pretend anything else.
But your side of politics too, your MPs in the coalition sometimes have problems when positions are announced by the leader and not taken to the party room.
But we have freedom of our own position. We can cross the floor and do whatever we need to do to defend our own personal integrity and our stance. And I think that's a very important principle to maintain. That doesn't happen in the Labor Party, and that's their machine politics. The Prime Minister owes her position to the Labor right. She betrayed the Labor left faction, and she's treated them with contempt and disdain ever since.
We might go to one of those positions where coalition MPs will vote against coalition intentions. That's on the Murray-Darling Basin plan. Don, there will be moves to disallow the plan announced by the Minister Tony Burke last week. Do they have any chance of success?
Look, I certainly hope that they don't, Lyndal. Tony Burke's done a fantastic job in getting the Murray-Darling Basin plan to the point it is at the moment. We're on the cusp of a brand new era in terms of the future of the Murray-Darling Basin, both in terms of the environment and also in terms of its food production. We understand Mr Abbott is going to support the plan. We're very appreciative of that, but I guess the concern is that the Liberals are now divided on it. I'd be most disappointed if that Liberal Party division, unlike the Labor Party, which is, as you know, united on this issue, we want to get the best outcome for South Australia, for the environment and for the irrigators who live in.
And Cory, do you believe that most coalition MPs and senators will not back a disallowance?
No, they won't. The coalition will support this because we think it's actually the best outcome. It's worked very well between Barnaby Joyce and Mr Burke. I think we've got a resolution. As a South Australian, I'm very pleased with it. There are some people that would like a better deal for their own constituencies. This is one of the great freedoms of the Liberal Party. They're allowed to express that without being expelled, without being beaten up by faceless men.
I'm sorry, Don, to cut you off, but we have run out of time. Cory Bernardi and Don Farrell, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.